This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in partnership with Tesco.
Look, we've tried in a very difficult sugar market to give growers options, and the price of £30 a tonne for 65% is a good price, I think, in the current climate, but growers are exposed to the risk of the market as well.
Is £30 a tonne for sugar beet really an acceptable price? We find out, with more on electronic tagging for cattle, just what's driving up food price inflation, and we pay tribute to farmer and veteran broadcaster David Richardson. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
All that and more coming up, but first our top story. A hugely variable cereal harvest this summer has seen many growers in prime arable areas reporting terrible yields. But has one crop bucked the trend? Well, it appears so. After years of decline and disappointment, oilseed rape is having a bit of a moment. Could it perhaps be crop of the year? Lincolnshire grower Ben Jackson is among those who've had a surprisingly good oilseed rape harvest.
Yeah, surprisingly good, actually. Very happy with it. The dry and sunny weather in the spring, we think, has pushed our yields up to a near record average yield for us, comfortably over 4.3 tonnes to the hectare, which, given where we've been for the last few years, has been fantastic.
And were those harvest yields what you expected, or did they come as a surprise, Ben?
It was a surprise that it was as good as it was. It's looked good all year round, but as we all know with rape, that it can flatter to deceive that way. But this year I feel that it looked good. It had the right conditions. It had a hell of a taproot going down that kept it with moisture. So surprised it was such a good average yield, being comfortably over 4.2, 4.3. But all year round, it looked like it was going to do above average.
So did you do anything differently in terms of crop management then, Ben?
So for the establishment, we used the 10 shared strategies for OSR success, which was the initiative from United Oilseeds, AHDB, and 50 or so industry partners. So particularly for us, it was ditching the date and drilling the conditions. So we waited until there was plenty of moisture in the soil. So we actually ended up drilling in the first week of September. Nowadays, with the hybrid vigor we've got from the new varieties, actually drilling slightly later into the right conditions seemed to be the right thing to do for us.
And I guess, we've had an early harvest this year. People will be probably itching to get going. I know some people are drilling rape early, but there is that temptation to get it in the ground, and yet it is a crop, obviously, that needs moisture with a small seed.
Yes, correct. We have started drilling just a little bit of area, but we're holding off mainly on the main blocks for next year, waiting for that moisture to come through.
So you are going again. Was there much beetle pressure last season?
No, surprisingly little. I think the reduction in area in overall crop in the country may have helped, and more people were doing surface cultivations beforehand, which disrupted the beetle, I think. So no, the beetle pressure, we had magic traps out monitoring the beetle in our stubbles, and it was down remarkably on the year before. And that's, we've seen that this year carrying on, the fact that when we've been harvesting and had the magic traps out since harvest, that actually the beetle pressure is well down on previous years.
So some rape going in now. Are you doing anything else differently this time around? Are you sticking to those 10 strategies? Sticking
to the 10 strategies. Our area used to be 25% of the cropping. It's now 10 for last year and this year. So we're trying to concentrate on doing a better job on less land, which seems to be resulting in higher yields.
Lincolnshire grower Ben Jackson. Now, those 10 strategies for growing a successful rape crop are being promoted by farmer-owned United Oilseeds. They're part of an OSR reboot campaign launched by the break crop specialist. United Oilseeds Chief Executive James Warner.
We started the OSR reboot campaign back in 2024, really in order to galvanise the industry and try and provide growers with some tools and a wider toolkit to try and build confidence growing OSR again. Things like the 10 strategies that Ben mentioned endorsed by multiple different partners across the industry, has had some impact. It'd be disingenuous to say that really is why we've achieved record yields this year. We have been lucky with good weather at establishment, timely rains, and particularly I think wall-to-wall sunshine during the flowering period. That's definitely helped. But I think the lack of flea beetle really in the last growing season has clearly had a big impact. Ben mentioned about the post-harvest cultivation study back in the end of last year's crop. We went out to members and suggested as a call to arms really for members to go out and do a shallow cultivation. That's on the back of work that Colin Peters did at NIAB, showing that it disrupts the life cycle of the flea beetle in the soil. So I do think has had an impact, because as Ben talked about, magic traps, just the magic trap network that we have out there, didn't have any flea beetle in the soil. We did a spring larvae survey, national spring larvae survey, partnered with ourselves, Agri and Hutchinson's in the spring, and that also showed relatively low flea beetle numbers. And so that's had a real knock-on effect, and we just then seem to this year those factors have all combined, and we're pretty confident here, looking at all the United Oilseeds data that we get, that we've got record yields here in the UK of getting close to 4 tonne a hectare.
The challenge, I guess, is going to be to keep this momentum going, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's OSR is incredibly important to the UK, both from an economic growth point of view, from a food and feed security point of view, and from a biodiversity and pollinator number point of view. Those are kind of the 3 pillars of the OSR reboot that we need to address. And it's also incredibly important for UK growers. We're absolutely desperate for a reliable break crop here in the UK, and oilseed rape has 2 million tonnes of domestic demand on our doorstep that we can tap into. So finding a way to reliably grow oilseed rape in the future is incredibly important.
I guess some people listening to this will say, well, that's all great, but for me, my yields weren't good this year. It has been a really challenging harvest for some people. What would you say to them? What would you advise them to be doing? Yeah,
there is always exceptions, and when we talk about average record yields, it's always tricky for some that have struggled. But oilseed rape is by far the best paying break crop for many this year. Would have outperformed probably even on a gross margin level, even first weeks. So it's probably the best paying crop on the farm. But it's important we don't become complacent, as I say. And we do focus now on continuing to practice those 10 shared strategies that has been endorsed by the industry. I think that should mean the future's fairly bright for oilseed rape.
That's James Warner from United Oilseeds. So, Louise, oilseed rape, crop of the year, at least for some people.
Well, it certainly seems to have had a much better year this year than it did have last year. So it would have been very difficult for it to have been any worse than last year. So a complete reversal of the oilseed rape crop's fortunes when it comes to harvest results. But I think we probably need to just acknowledge that farmers are currently harvesting the smallest oilseed rape crop we've had since 1983. So that just gives us the context, doesn't it? And it's good news that they're getting better results, because it has become a high-risk crop. And we know that the economics of a high-yielding crop do outweigh the alternatives when it comes to break crops. So I think a lot of people will be relieved. They've seen some better yields, better results, and as a result, hopefully will be committed to oilseed rape again.
As a crop, I always see oilseed rape as being really deceptive. It can look really good and yield next to nothing at all, and then at other times it can look like it's on its last legs and it yields really well. You never really know what you're going to get with oilseed rape until it's in the barn.
No, that's right. And I mean, we've seen that. And over the last few years, when it's really had very mixed fortunes, it's been very difficult to call how it is going to perform. But there have been things that have been done. There are measures now that growers are doing to de-risk the crop, and they do seem to be paying off. I think also we have to acknowledge as well that cabbage stem flea beetles seem to have disappeared, or certainly from most places. So we've certainly gone from one extreme to the other when it comes to that particular pest.
And I asked in the audio, Louise, how much of this year's performance is down to the Reboot OSR campaign and how much is down to luck? I'll ask you the same thing. Is it down to luck? Is the campaign having a real effect?
Well, there's always some luck involved, isn't there, in farming? So, yes, there's luck. But I think also there has been a real concerted effort, and there's been an industry-wide initiative which has really brought together all the knowledge and all the information to try and really help growers. The other thing, of course, which I'm sure has changed some attitudes towards oilseed rape, is that there are some schemes out there now whereby growers only pay for the oilseed rape crops that survive. And when I say only pay, I mean for the seed. So if crops fail by the end of October and don't survive that crucial establishment window, then they do get their money back. So these de-risking partnerships, they've been helpful, I'm sure, in persuading people to give it another go. I mean, we know, don't we, with oilseed rape, that what we need is rapid, vigorous and even establishment. And if we don't get that, then it's never very good news for the crop.
Oilseed rape also needs moisture. We've not got much of that at the moment. We've also had a very early harvest. Are people banging it in the ground now, or are they biding their time and going for later drilling this year when perhaps there will be some more moisture in the ground?
Well, I think there is already quite a bit of oilseed rape in the ground. As you say, early harvest meant there was an opportunity to get on and get it in. It's a nice problem to have, isn't it, when you've already got an oilseed rape crop romping away and you do tend to wonder what's going to happen next. I think the more difficult decision is for those people who haven't drilled yet, because we are looking at some very, very dry seed beds, and we know this is a small seeded crop, and we have always, the advice has always been to growers to wait for adequate moisture. So I'm not quite sure when that's going to come. So that is a more difficult decision. As we move from August into September, it starts to get a bit late for oilseed rape. So we'll just have to see what people decide to do on that one.
And how about you, Hugh? I know you don't grow much oilseed rape yourself there in Surrey, but where you are, dry in Dorking?
Yeah, it's very dry. It's ridiculously dry. Although we cultivated some ground for some grass the other day, and I was actually surprised how much that there was some moisture. But yes, we haven't really had, like anyone, the rain suddenly disappeared. A few miserly mornings. If this hurricane comes in next weekend, we could see some rain here, which would be welcome, but everything is dry. It's not a great place to be. I'd be really nervous putting oilseed rape in the ground with it as dry as it is. I know you want to get it established, but you just think it's been such a cruel year that it's a something classic thing. You get it in the ground, germinates, and then it bakes off. Or everything else attacks it. But hopefully, if it's not in the ground already, it's going to get some rain not this weekend, but the weekend after. My screen is showing that hurricane's coming in, and it could throw us a fair bit of rain. Probably too much in some places.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And now a sponsored interview with this week's podcast partner, Tesco. And I'm joined by Natalie Smith, Head of Sustainable Agriculture and Fisheries at Tesco, to talk about Tesco's Green Print for UK Farming report and low carbon concept farms. Natalie, this is all about a more sustainable future for farming. How long do you think it's going to take?
I think we recognise that it's going to take some time for change to happen. However, there's always going to be quick wins that we can implement in the short term, and then there's going to be stuff that will take more time to implement across our total supply chain. It's very much is about a two-way exchange of ideas. And I think as part of the Green Print for UK Farming report, one of the other big areas that was highlighted by our farmers was around measuring and managing, so standardising data and insight. So the more we're able to use our low carbon concept farms to be able to share what we think are the options in terms of measuring and managing, how we can start to use one data set to be able to share this information, I think again will be super helpful for all parts of the supply chain.
And what sort of benefits are growers and livestock producers going to see then?
In terms of benefits across our supply chain, I think the key thing for us is around that collaboration and sharing of knowledge and best practice. There will definitely be areas where will fail, so where things won't be successful, and even just being able to share that information I think is super important. There'll also obviously be areas where it's been massively successful and it's a win-win in terms of improvement from an environmental perspective, but also improvement on the bottom line. So for us to be able to share that across our whole farm supply chain, and for farmers to be able to start making informed decisions around how tech and innovation can support their business for the future will be hugely beneficial for all of the supply chain.
And I guess knowing what doesn't work as well as what does work, it is almost equally important.
Absolutely. And we've looked at innovation for a while within our agri supply chains. We have sustainable farming groups in place across Tesco, and we've done some stuff in the past where we've trialled new tech and it hasn't been successful. So just being able to share that with our farmers to say, actually, this one isn't ready for investment, whereas this one is beneficial to us all.
And it's not just for the farmers that are participating in these in these trials, as it were. This is for all farms.
Absolutely. The very principle of it is that we don't want these to just operate in isolation, and for us to show what's possible on one farm, we want to be looking at tech and innovation that is scalable. Otherwise, it sort of defeats the object of what we're trying to achieve.
So it's not all about Tesco then. There are going to be wider benefits.
Definitely. We don't want to just be operating in isolation. I think that was one of the clear bits of feedback that came out as part of the Greenprint for UK Farming report, where farmers getting mixed messages from different parts of the supply chain is really unhelpful. So where we can work more collaboratively up and down that supply chain and give one message or support in a more comprehensive collective way is always going to be of benefit. I think the whole measuring and managing part will be super important as part of this programme as well. So we want to make sure that we have that independent assessment. So working with the relevant universities or research institutes who can validate some of the data that we're getting back out of the farms and help to give that reassurance to our broader supply chain.
Natalie Smith, Head of Sustainable Agriculture and Fisheries at Tesco, this week's Farmers Weekly podcast partner. Thank you very much.
Arable farming made easy with Avant. Transform your operations with our powerful, versatile loaders. With over 200 attachments, Avant loaders help boost productivity. Watch your yields grow. Search for Avant now.
The Farmers Weekly podcast.
Now, last week we featured concern over the different electronic identification systems being used for cattle in England and Scotland. England's chosen a low-frequency or LF system, with Scotland going for an ultra-high frequency system. Auctioneers say having two different systems will cause huge challenges for the cross-border livestock trade between the two countries. This week, we speak to NFU Scotland Vice President Robert Neal, who says the Scottish ultra-high frequency system is much faster than England's low-frequency technology.
Yeah, it's comparing the old copper line to super fast broadband, or your old brick phone to a new digital smartphone.
Scotland's UHF system then being much faster than England's low-frequency system, and for you, UHF has much more potential than LF for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, it's UHF is in the early days of the technology, and we need to, as a farming industry, we need to embrace new technology. LF is old technology. UHF is relatively new into cattle identification, but we need to develop it and use it to our best advantages, and it can store an awful lot more data. But let's be straight. The first and foremost thing is every bovine animal has got a unique ID, and that ID, legal ID, is the number that's printed on the outside of the tag, not the chip that's on the inside. So it's irrelevant, really, what technology and what chip is on the inside. It is the ID printed on the outside of the tag for all movements of animals. It's recorded.
What's the way forward then, Robert?
Well, hopefully in time, I think if it becomes mandatory in Scotland at the end of 2026 or beginning of 2027, and R&D is correct and more tag manufacturers come on board, but we need it mandatory until tag manufacturers and hardware suppliers have got the confidence that they've got a market. They're not going to invest in developing this technology until they know they've got a payback. So until such times, we're kind of restrained a little bit. But once it becomes mandatory, I'm sure all these manufacturers will come on board and look and develop this new technology. And it's not compulsory for anybody to have the hardware on farm. You can still read every single tag manually if you want for cross-border movements.
And the database?
Yeah, so Scotland broke away from BCMS, or cattle tracing system, and developed their own database, Scott EID. It is absolutely fantastic. It is a real-time database. It's instant. It records all the BVD status of every farm in Scotland. It now records all the blue tongue vaccination that's going on. The database includes cattle, sheep, horses, pigs, chickens, ferrets, and pigeons. And it works seamlessly. Not a massive cost to the taxpayer. 12 people man the phones, run the database. There's a few IT people behind the scenes that are always tweaking and keeping it up to date, but a really good showcase for Scotland to show the rest of the UK or world that these things can be achieved on a fairly small budget.
NFU Scotland Vice President Robert Neal. So Hugh, the Scottish system, it can do cattle, it can do pigeons, it can even do ferrets. And Robert clearly not agreeing with everything we said last week.
No, that's fair enough. That's the joy of open debate. And no, look, I get his points. I get his points about the Scott EID system. If it's small, cute, low cost, and it's really effective, which it sounds like it is, then that's great. And it should be the exemplar to what we should try and build here on the English side of the border, although the chance a bit fine thing. But anyway, we're getting there slowly. I think the idea that we just need to adopt new technology because it's new technology, I find that one hard to get. Ultimately, as I said in the piece the other week, we need to have a system that can do both. If you want to do both, you can. But actually having one leading initially would help. And particularly, we were centering this around the issues at Carlisle Market, the fact that they're going to have to read all different types of tags. It would just be simpler to have one system, go over to one or the other. But at the moment, the UHF one isn't fully proven. It's not ISO accredited in terms of export and everything that goes along with that. I get that the kit's cheaper, the tags are marginally cheaper. The idea that you can store more information on the tag, I don't buy that, because at the end of the day, the information is in the cloud. You don't put all of your phone contacts and your whole lot. You used to have your whole life on your phone, and you went out and you dropped it in a pond, and it was gone because it didn't back up anywhere and all your contacts went. Now it sits in a cloud. So whether it's a UHF tag or an LF tag in an animal's ear, all of the useful data is in the cloud, and that's where it should stay, because it's dangerous to have it also in the EID tag, surely, because then if it's all in there, it gets lost.
So Hugh, Robert did say in the audio that the UHF system was more beneficial to the industry. Now, this is not my specialist subject at all, so I'm just wondering what he meant by that.
You could argue that it's beneficial because the kit is cheaper, the scanners are cheaper, the guns are cheaper because it's used in Amazon warehouses, etc., all over the world already. In terms of beneficial, yes, you could argue in some cases the range is wider, it is longer, but then equally that has drawbacks when you've got lots of cattle in a confined space that you're not 100% sure the ones that you've scanned are the ones that you've scanned and not the ones stood in the pen next door. This idea, again, of storing data on tags, I don't buy, because ultimately all the database is in the cloud. That's where the power is. That's where the analytics is. That's where the dissemination is. That's where the traceability is. That's where all that power sits. The slot that says EID could either be a UHF number or an LF number in the database line. And that's ultimately what we probably want to end up with, is a dual system, or something that you could use a dual system on if you so chose to do so.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
This year, New Holland celebrates 50 years of twin rotor technology, first introduced on the groundbreaking TR70 combine in 1975. Today's CR series continues that legacy, delivering powerful rotor performance, excellent grain quality, and smart tech that adapts to changing crops. Less loss, more yield, and less operator stress. Celebrate 5 decades of innovation. Speak to your New Holland dealer today.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can also message us by texting the word farm followed by a message to 88440. That's exactly what Robert Neal from NFU Scotland did. Got in touch with us, and we're pleased to have had Robert on this episode. Lots about farming in the news this week, lots about agriculture in the mainstream media. Louise, what's caught your eye? There's been lots to talk about.
Yeah, there has been, hasn't there? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? And of course, the topic which they've picked on, or certainly that the Times has picked on, is the current drought situation. And they had an article this week saying farmers struggling after devastatingly dry growing season. And the farmer that they featured, a lovely picture of him, that's Martin Williams, who's been on the podcast before. He farms in Herefordshire. It's a bit ironic, really, seeing as some of his land literally goes down to the River Wye, and they're talking about a lack of rainfall, a lack of water. And Martin is saying that he is seriously considering not planting cereals at all this autumn because he saw very reduced yields this year, he says, from the lack of moisture. So he's really considering what he should do next year. And I'm sure he's not the only one considering that. Now, he has got a few other things going on. As he says, he's developed multiple income streams. So that gives him a bit of breathing space, if you like. But it's I think it's really important to say Herefordshire's not obviously the only area affected. Other areas have been in drought conditions, and it is quite serious out there. So we might see some quite different cropping as people decide what the best thing is to do.
Another serious topic hitting the headlines this week, Hugh, food price inflation in The Guardian.
Yeah, the unexpected hike in inflation this week, which I think surprised everybody, but 3.8% of it. The inflation goes by more than the expected 3.8, and I think it goes slightly over that. But the main basis of this is the big driver. It's not fuel costs, because petrol, I think, was 0.1%. It's all about food, and it makes reference to beef costs. It makes reference to salad costs. It makes reference to a lot of it. Droughts in Spain, Italy, and Portugal, where the UK sources much of its fresh fruit and vegetables, have pushed up prices this summer. So it's obvious. It's climate is a big issue here, and climate is having. We've said this before, that if you want resilient food supply, and resilient food supply, of course, means less affected by the weather, then you have to invest in that supply chain. And we're starting to see, whether that's on farm or every level, but we are starting to see, things going wrong, whether it's around harvests in every part of the world where climate is having a huge impact, and it's causing those prices to spike. And that is what we're seeing now. So based on what the weather's done over the last 5 to 10 years, where the heck's this going to be in another 10 years' time? Really worrying. And of course, the article then goes on to say, of course, that the Bank of England chose, it was a a very tight decision. They chose to drop interest rates, but nearly, just under half of the MPC, the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee, didn't want to drop interest rates because of this very reason, that they were afraid that inflation would start to pull away again. Not a great story in the sense that it has an impact, and this has a huge impact on every household across the country.
Higher food prices then for consumers, but not higher prices for sugar beet growers following the latest pricing agreement between NFU Sugar and processing giant British Sugar. A headline figure of £33 per tonne for the first 65% of the crop, which is £3 less than this year, although there are various pricing formulas that growers can choose from. We caught up with NFU Sugar Chairman and Norfolk sugar beet grower Kit Papworth, and to put it to Kit that £30 a tonne is lower than many growers would like although at least it does begin with a 3.
Look, we've tried in a very difficult sugar market to give growers options, and we've negotiated a contract holiday as well. The price of £30 a tonne for 65%, is a good price, I think, in the current climate. But growers are exposed to the risk of the market as well. So yeah, I think we've done as good a job as we can on behalf of growers.
And without wanting to labour the point, Kit, there will be people out there who will be feeling that you could and should have got a little bit more out of this deal. But what you're saying is it is a tough market.
It is a tough market in sugar at the moment around the world. There is a bit of demand destruction, as they call it in the sugar industry, just a lack of demand across the world. And we have to recognise that the prices aren't where they were. But if you are optimistic, the prices will recover by 27 and beyond. Then the futures link and market link bonuses options are both there for you to have a go at. And I think some growers I've spoken to will probably do that.
You're confident then, Kit, that this deal gives enough to your members to continue growing the crop and also enough to your members to continue reinvesting in their farm businesses?
I'm confident that some growers can make money at this price, but I'm also aware that some growers, potentially with lower yields, will struggle, and that's why the contract holiday is there. So that if you really can't see a way to make money at these sort of prices, then you should probably think about that contract holiday and look at some alternatives, because there are some out there.
And that's going to be a question from me, Kit. This 1 year holiday, can you explain a little bit more about that? What does that mean for sugar beet growers?
Well, there's 75,000 tonnes on offer on a first come, first served basis. So if you are a sugar beet grower, you can choose to put some or all of your tonnage on a contract holiday. You'll be entitled to grow that again on a subsequent year. But you can just opt out of growing sugar beet this year, or some of all of your tonnage.
And you mentioned that you've spoken to quite a few beet growers about the new deal. What has been their response? Have they been speaking with one voice on this?
I think personally, growers are pleased to have a price. They've got something they can work with now. It's August, and we've still got time to put, say, oilseed rape in my part of the world in, and so they're firstly pleased to have a price. And I agree with Johann that a price starting with a 3 is a good start. But not everybody can make money at £30 a tonne, or indeed at 25 plus what a market link price might turn into. So. Not everybody is universally excited about these prices, and so I've had mixed reactions, and from everybody from large growers saying they're going to take a full contract holiday, to smaller growers saying no, I can grow at 30. I'm sticking in it. I haven't heard anybody yet say they want to grow more sugar beet this year, but that may suit the market, and that may suit the processor too.
And what will you do on your own farm? Have you made your mind up yet?
Well, we're a family farming business, so it's not just my decision, but we'll be having rotation meetings this year. We've taken on a little bit of extra land, so I think it's unlikely that we'll increase our sugar beet area, but I think it's unlikely we'll cut very much. We're fortunate to have some good land, which most of which we've looked after for a while. So I think we'll probably stick to a similar area to the last few years, but we won't increase.
And a mix of all three options?
That really is a choice the family will have to make as a group. But I suspect we will have a bit of a play on the futures options. I think we will think that €600 is an achievable price. So we'll probably put some of our larger contracts will have a tonnage on the futures, and then obviously we'll take some in market link bonus as well.
That's NFU Sugar Chairman and Norfolk Sugar Beet grower Kit Papworth on the latest pricing agreement between NFU Sugar and British Sugar. Hugh, a complicated business, all these sugar beet pricing formulas. The rest of the commodity market prices, though, this week, are they any simpler?
Markets this week, finished steer cattle deadweight average goes up to 0.5 of a penny, 643.5. The live weight average 366.3. Sheep prices have pretty much actually stood on. The deadweight SQQ this week stands on at 754.7 pence per kilo, so it's exactly the same. Still higher than a year ago, 667.3 it was a year ago. Live weight lamb average 327.1. That's dropped got back about 20p on the week. The pig price has gone back about 0.3 of a penny, 207.8. And then the arable markets, not much cheer there, really. Feed wheat spots this week at 161.40. That's gone up. Well, it's gone up 10p, a whole 10p a tonne. So that'll change all the margins, won't it? Milling wheat, 181.70. That has gone back about £3 a tonne. Feed barley, 140.50. That's gone back £3 or £3 on the week. Oilseed rape goes up nearly £10, £8 on. Takes the spot price on rape to 392.80 this week. So it's doing all right. And actually, a year ago, some cheer in the fact that a year ago, a tonne of oilseed rape was £370. So it's about the only arable crop that's actually worth more this year than it was last. Feed peas, 211.60. Feed beans at 211.90. If you are filling tractors with diesel, which everyone is like mad at the moment because everyone's so busy, 65.7 pence per litre. That is that's about a penny and a half back on last week. So that's good news after the Wednesday morning ring round of the various diesel suppliers.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're up before sunrise during the busiest time of year and still on your feet 12 hours later. The V12 Cotswold dealer boot is made for days like this, built for comfort, safety and strength to handle whatever the day throws at you. They've been independently tested by Sartre against the market-leading boot, proving they're not only the toughest, but outperforming the competition in long-lasting durability as well. No gimmicks, just boots that do their job, so you can do yours. Now that's fair dinkum. Use the code podcast20 for 20% off your first order. Visit v12footwear.com to place your order now. The V12 Cotswold gets tougher with age.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, time to reflect on a life well lived. David Richardson, the highly respected Norfolk farmer, journalist, broadcaster and former Farmers Weekly columnist, has died at the age of 87. Best known for his straight-talking analysis, deep insight and tireless advocacy for British agriculture, David was a leading voice in the farming world for more than 60 years. David spoke to us here on the Farmers Weekly podcast just 4 years ago when he launched his autobiography, In at the Deep End. And as a tribute, we thought we'd play that interview again.
Essex land being pulled down and drilled earlier this week on the farm where a record 9,200 weights an acre yield for wheat combined last harvest is being claimed. And what a marvellous autumn it's been for drilling so far.
Archive footage there of something which no longer exists on UK regional television, and that's a local farming show. That was Anglia TV in the 1980s, and it was Farming Diary, which was presented by, some of you will recognise the voice, David Richardson. Now, David is obviously familiar to many Farmers Weekly readers, as his opinion piece in the magazine has been running for over 40 years. Well, this week sees the launch of a revised version of his autobiography, and earlier I caught up with him and I started by asking him how, as a Norfolk young farmer, he got into doing all the media jobs.
I usually tell people I needed the money, but it wasn't quite as simple as that. I started off, and indeed everything I've ever done can be traced right back to the Young Farmers Club, I think. I was a chairman of our local Young Farmers when I was 19, and we had a speaker in who was a local landowner, and for some reason he seemed to take to me. And when he had a farm that came up for rent very soon after, he let me have it. And I was 20 when I hired my first farm. So I was rather sort of wet behind the ears, but I carried on. I got married soon after that as well. And then I suddenly had a man called Dick Joyce, who was the local celebrity farmer, came to see me because he was going to be doing another programme called About Anglia. And he said, would I come and do 6 programmes about my farm? And he paid me 7 guineas per item, which was an awful lot of money in those days, 1960. And anyway, I went and did these 6 items, and then the producer of the program said, "Oh dear, darling, I hope you're coming in again out next week. Our listeners like you, and you bring a bit of fresh air into the studio," he said. And anyway, I did, and that went on for a year, and then for a second year. Then after that, I got picked up by the BBC, and well, the rest is history, as I say. And I got involved in journalism and column writing and all that sort of thing as it went along.
Now, David, you've never been one to hold back when it comes to politicians or indeed farm leaders. So over your career of watching farm politics and policy making, who would you say are the best and the very worst politicians when it comes to farming?
Well, there's been so many, it's difficult to pinpoint one, I suppose. Most of them are not up to the job, I believe, but one who was very, very clever was Peter Walker. He was Minister of Agriculture when we had a Ministry of Agriculture back in the early 80s when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. And Peter Walker developed a thing called food from our own resources. It was while we were in our infancy, in the common market, and he wanted to make sure that this country was producing all that it could and all that it needed to as far as feeding our own population. You said who was the worst. I think that is easier. Margaret Beckett, who I think had a very, very bad influence on DEFRA because she was the first boss of DEFRA. I remember one occasion, for instance, at an Oxford conference where she was a keynote speaker, and one of the people in the audience asked her a question as to whether or not she had had done any calculations on how much food should be produced in this country. And she didn't answer it, as politicians never do. So when we went into as I was privileged to go into the press conference, I asked her again. I said, "Mrs. Beckett, have you ever done this calculation? And do you know how much food we need? And do you have a food policy?" And she glared at me across the room with eyes blazing and told me that the world was awash with food and that we could buy any amount of it cheaper than we could produce it in this country, and I should stop wasting her time with such ridiculous nonsense. So she was the worst, and I think we have a legacy of that thinking in DEFRA even today.
David, what was the inspiration for writing this book? What made you put pen to paper?
Again, I needed the money. No, but it's a very arrogant to think that anybody wants to read about your life. However, whenever I meet anybody and who realizes that I've done a lot of writing and television and radio and all that sort of stuff, they all say, "How on earth did it?" Well, they imply, "How on earth did a silly old farmer like you get involved in so much media?" And so, therefore, when I sort of semi-retired, I thought I might as well write this book, and hopefully some people will enjoy it. A few people have said that it's all right, so I'm pleased, and I hope an awful lot more will do so.
That's farmer and veteran agricultural journalist David Richardson, who's died at the age of 87, talking to the Farmers Weekly podcast back in 2021 on the publication of his autobiography, In at the Deep End. Hugh, as forthright and straight talking as ever when it comes to politicians. David Richardson, he'll be much, much missed. A lovely man.
Yeah, he was. He was so kind and well, yeah, I mean, everyone said he's so knowledgeable, so kind, so lovely. I was honoured and lucky enough to be, when I was doing opinion columns for Farmers Weekly, my word, nearly 20 years ago, and I was the bi-weekly opposite side of the page to him. He was on the right side, and then there was myself. I think Matthew Naylor was doing it then, and various others. And he was always so, whenever you saw him at events, he was always, just really kind, really encouraging, knowledgeable, happy to share, just great. And so, real loss. And Our thoughts with his family and all his friends. But what a career! And actually, the thing about that opinion piece that always amazed me was he was the longest writer of that sort of piece for Farmers Weekly, I think, ever. And doing that every week. I mean, I struggle to do 5 years every other week. And I generally don't struggle for words, but that is hard work. Trying to write something original with an angle, it is really hard work. And it's a real talent to do that. And well done, David. And thank you.
Yes, David Richardson, a giant of agricultural journalism, and as a farmer, somebody who'd started out when food was scarce during a time of rationing and had seen it right through to where we are today, when many politicians, including Margaret Beckett, take food for granted. So David reminding us of the importance of food production, of food security, but also reminding us that farming has environmental responsibilities too. And his leadership on that led to the formation of the Linking Environment and Farming charity LEAF, which remains at the forefront of responsible agriculture today. Louise, lots of memories.
Yeah, lots of memories. And I think I will probably just echo the sentiments of other people. Any of us that work in this sort of communications world in farming will have come across David, and David, every single time, as Hugh's just said, would have been very encouraging. And he certainly made you feel as though he did read all the things that you wrote. And of course, the other thing is that he had a really good sense of humour as well. So you could always have a chuckle with him. And, he understood the world that we were operating in. And I had one really interesting bit of feedback from a contact of mine who actually works in forestry. And he said, ever since my teenage years in the 90s, I would always turn to David's column first to see what his thoughts were on the latest topic or what was happening on his farm in Norfolk. So I think that's a real tribute to the man. As he said, it's sad news and a great loss to the agricultural industry, and he's absolutely spot on with that.
Yes, Godspeed. David Richardson, we'll miss you. And that is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. Some food for thought, as always. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories in UK farming. But for now, until next week, I'm Johann Tasker.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you in partnership with Tesco.